Hey, what's up, everybody? It's the new whatever, as you guys know. Um, there's not really much for me to say this video except for like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Check it down inside the description because I have my Discord and TFP's Discord. I also have AAG Demons Discord and FWB's Discord down there. If you guys would like new videos or anything like that, or if you guys want to see videos earlier, or even have a kind of potential to vote on what I might do, there's the community tab, but there is also my Discord. My Discord sometimes for different videos inside of my new videos channel. You'll see me sometimes ask, hey, should I do this video or that video? If you want anything a part of that, or if you just want to talk to me or anything like that, I'm not, one of those people that are too big on not talking to my fans. So I'll talk to all of y'all. Pretty open to new people. And without a further ado, let's get into it. So look, right? Zuko's room is quiet. The only thing that could be heard is a soft rustle of sheets. Like I was saying, the only thing that could be heard was a slight groan underneath the sheets. As we pan over to Izuku, as we see him laying face down inside of his bed, his fingers kind of, squeezing the fabrics of his bed inside of frustration. As the past two couple of weeks have been rough on him. It's been a nightmare of paparazzi for the most part. People questioning him on how he was able to survive, how he was doing. Some people think it was fake because of how fast he was able to heal from his injuries, into which he knows that was not the case. After being questioned and investigated by police, he was told the best situation is to probably just keep quiet and ignore all of them. He knows the best out of anyone how fast his body heals, since he literally has to feel the effects of his body healing day by day after that entire situation. And for the most part, he's completely healed his body. Again, for the most part. That's not really the thing that's on his mind. He's grateful for saving Bakugo's life and everything like that. And it's not like it's a side thing or anything like that to him. The main thing that's bumming him out is that All Might was so focused on the speech that he was giving and the promise of guidance and overall greatness of potentially becoming a hero that he forgot to give him a card. So for the past 2 weeks, it's basically been a follow-up of a whole bunch of nothing. Especially since there's basically nothing he can do. Izuku kind of, turns over as he thinks to himself, oh, why me? As he keeps repeating why me over and over and over again. And eventually he kind of gets up and he looks around his room, as not only his room but the entire house is just quiet. Why does everything always have to fall onto me? First my mom getting hurt, then the sludge villain, then this. It's like every single good thing that can happen into my life just gets curved. He kind of rolls off the bed and he looks out the window as he sees a faint glow of the street lights across the walls. As when he's looking outside, he kind of sees the skies dark as he sighs to himself as he says, of course I gotta start my shift. He kind of gets up out of bed And when he gets up out of bed, he walks over to his workstation. On his workstation, he sees a sword, specifically two kunai, shuriken, two small hand tantos with sheaths and a utility belt, and devices made to kind of fill that surface. He sees a couple of tech trackers that he made from a few Apple tags that he broke apart and repurposed. They're not really able to stick to anything, but they're still more or less usable if they don't clonk out. So he kind of puts everything into his utility belt and everything like that. He puts on all of his gear. He puts on the mask that he made for himself, aka the mask that you see inside the photo, as he kind of tightens it onto his face. It has a tightening kind of function so that it doesn't fall off, or so that it's not made super small onto his face and hurts it. He can basically fit it onto his face. The metal is obviously made out of beryllium. So it's a pretty good face guard also, making it so that if a villain has any type of weapons or guns or anything like that, it can repel most attacks. Not all of them. As he kind of puts on his cloak and everything like that he spray painted to be green. So it does kind of leave behind a smell, but not a bad one. The smell of obviously spray paint. Wow, stuttering is getting me today. He checks all of his armor and everything like that, as he's pretty good. For the most part, he has a couple of paddings underneath his cloak. So he tested them personally, and they can withstand anything that's not too hard of an attack. They're not really meant to stop attacks so much as they are to slow them down so that they don't, kill him, especially because of how fast he can heal. He doesn't really have to worry about that as much. But too much healing and too many creations of his weapons can physically slow him down. So for the most part, he does know that, doing that is not a good idea all the time. He can't just heal through everything. But for the most part, he kind of, shakes his head, getting those thoughts out of his brain as he looks back out of the window and kind of sees the labyrinth of rooftops and alleyways, as he kind of sighs and he thinks about everything that was still happening with his mother, as he still feels guilty that his powers couldn't have kicked in before he was able to save her. But he thinks to himself, none of it matters. The most important thing that does matter is saving other people, not me feeling bad about myself. And he eventually, goes downstairs, looks around the house one last time, and heads out. As he gets outside, he kind of feels the cool air of the night kind of touch against him. So he kind of moves his body a little bit, stretches. As he says, last time that I didn't stretch, I caught a cramp and got hit by a villain. So he kind of lifts up his shirt. So he looks at his chest as he sees a purple mark that's fading as he's looking at it, but is still kind of painful. As he thinks about the fact that when he did get hit, all the right side of his body was just black and purple. So needless to say, this injury is a lot better than, being horribly hurt and bruised. But he kind of takes this moment to breathe one last time. So he jumps up as he grabs onto the roof of his house, as he kind of springs himself up with one hand and lands onto his feet. As he walks up top of the roof, as he looks across the city, as he says, okay, so I can't go south. If I go south, there's more heroes over there. Can't go north, there's too many villains over there. West is good, but it doesn't have as many crimes. So it looks like we're going east. As when he says this, he kind of runs up to the side of the building and jumps off as he starts jumping roof to roof. As he starts, jumping across, you know, water banks and electrical boxes, kind of like a stray cat for the most part, just moving fast, looking around the city, trying to check anything that might be going on. So, for the most part, what he really finds whenever he scans the city is petty scuffles between people, stray cats, minor disturbances, stuff like that. For the most part, he's working on, helping people, even if it's small, but he kind of feels like it's a waste of his efforts. As when he kind of zones out, he barely stops himself right before accidentally jumping off the edge of a building that has no building in front of it. As he kind of looks at himself as he says, what the hell am I zoning out for? As soon as he thinks of that, he hears what sounds like a man screaming. As he kind of looks over, as he's kind of a little confused, as he starts to jump rooftop to rooftop. As when he's jumping rooftop to rooftop, he eventually sees a man getting just mugged. It doesn't look like it's just a simple mugging either, because the dude's bleeding. So obviously who's mugging him is not concerned of human life. As Izuku kind of, looks down to assess the entire situation. As for the most part, there's only one person, but that's the only person that he can see. As Izuku kind of, in a little bit of worry, realizes that not only does the person have a knife, he also has a gun. But he's not using the gun for some reason, which means it could not be loaded. Maybe it's there to scare him. But then again, the gun could just be, being held back for a more serious situation. Then he thinks to himself, if he has a gun but he's only using a knife, it could be something as serious as this person wanting this person to feel pain. This could be gang related, or even something as serious as the mob. As Izuku takes a couple steps back as he thinks to himself and remembers that promise that he made to himself right before he got into the car crash. As Izuku kind of, he kind of stops inside of his tracks as his chest kind of tightens. And even though he is scared, he eventually jumps down there. As when he jumps down there, the criminal kind of looks back as he hears him hit the floor. As Izuku kind of, looks at the dude as he says, okay, can you put the knife down? As the other dude looks at him as he says, look, kid, I don't know if you just recently got your quirk or if you feel like you're a hero or you're cocky or something like that. But if you can't notice, I have a gun and a knife. As, Izuku kind of looks over at the dude as he says, no, I definitely noticed, it was pretty obvious to say the least. As the dude kind of looks back at him as he says, that means go away. As, Izuku kind of walks up to him. So he says, sorry, dude, I can't really walk away. And as soon as he touches the dude on the shoulder, he gets almost a spike of danger as he jumps back as he barely dodges getting slashed. Izuku kind of looks down at him as he says, did you just try to cut me? As the dude just kind of looks at him as he says, I told you to get away from here, kid. As Izuku says, yeah, I'm not doing this. As he unsheaths both of his blades, as the mugger kind of looks over at him as he says, are you being serious right now? As Izuku kind of lowers his stance and kind of just looks at the dude. As the mugger kind of slashes at him, as Izuku dodges past the slash and goes to slash at the mugger. As when he does, he realizes his sword doesn't pass into his skin, which tells him one of two things. First off, this dude has a durability based quirk. And second off, this dude's going to be pretty hard to fight against. As when his, sword fully, leaves the dude's body, the dude kind of shoulder checks him as Izuku begins rolling. And the dude comes forward with a slash to Izuku's head. So he moves out of the way as the knife kind of slides across the ground as Izuku trips the dude and kicks him away. So the dude starts rolling down the alley, but he gains his bearings as he punches the ground and the ground begins to crack as Izuku loses his footing. The dude jumps up and kind of slashes at Izuku from above as Izuku kind of, jumps out of the way. And when Izuku jumps out of the way, he kind of throws his sword at the dude as the dude kind of gets stabbed by the sword, but it doesn't pass into his skin, like deep, deep. As Izuku kind of, sighs as he says, okay, luckily he is that durable. As the dude grabs Izuku's sword, as he goes to slash at Izuku, as he moves out of the way. As Izuku moves, he kind of hits him inside the side and sends the dude kind of sliding away. As he runs up to the dude and goes to drop kick him, the dude dodges and stabs Izuku inside of his side with his own sword. As Izuku hits the ground, as he screams inside of pain. As the dude comes from the side and goes to stab Izuku inside of his neck, so he moves out of the way barely and pulls the sword out of himself as he's bleeding everywhere. And he applies a little bit of pressure to the, wound and everything like that. As Izuku looks at the dude as he says, did you just try to fucking kill me? As he said, ooh, language. As the dude kind of starts to jump side to side. As Izuku instantly gets pissed off by this. As he throws a couple shuriken at the dude as the dude dodges. As when he dodges, Izuku pulls back to reveal that he had a couple of wire attached to the, shuriken as they fly back and stab the dude in his back. As Izuku pulls even harder, sending him flying towards him. As Izuku hits him multiple times with multiple punches in the chest and eventually kicks him away. Kind of like the Toji attack inside of JJK. As when the dude flies away, he kind of gets up to go and attack him. And when he looks for him, he notices Izuku isn't anywhere in front of him. So he looks up and sees Izuku come down with a ground pound as he barely gets out of the way. As when Izuku hits the ground, he kind of cracks the ground right in front of him. As the dude kind of goes to kick Izuku, Izuku catches his leg, like really hurting his hand on some shit, which pisses him off even more. As Izuku lifts the dude off the ground and slams him against the concrete and kicks him away. As when the dude starts rolling away, Izuku blitzes forward and stabs the dude inside of his stomach. Not inside of a lethal area, but he stabs him far enough to where the blade buries itself, but it doesn't stay all the way inside of his stomach. It just stops. As the dude kind of takes a few steps back. As he starts punching Izuku in the side of the head. As Izuku eventually, falls down. As he kind of grabs the knife, getting ready to pull it out. But then he realizes, if he pulls it out, he's going to start to bleed really fast. As the dude kind of gets mad, he says, what the fuck? As he starts, cussing Izuku out. As he starts stomping on his head back to back to back to back. And as Izuku's head is getting stomped on, he starts to slowly lose consciousness. And when he begins to lose consciousness, he eventually starts to get flashbacks of the car crash again. He gets flashbacks onto how the doctor told him that his mom may never wake up again. And it starts to get even worse when he remembers the driver that crashed into him and the fact that he was never able to get revenge on that driver. As when he kind of eventually, fully gets out of it, he's still getting his head stomped on as the dude pulls out his gun and goes to shoot at Izuku. As Izuku kind of wakes up and inside of a fit of rage, he grabs the gun and crushes it. As he pulls back his hand, inside of a surprising moment, his the muscles on his hand almost extend themselves or become more pronounced as his nails kind of sharpen as Izuku stabs forward through the dude's shoulder, literally embedding his entire hand through the dude's shoulder as Izuku literally flings the dude inside of a wall as he starts punching him back to back to back to back to back, kicking him, kind of shoulder checking him, punching him so hard that the wall is breaking behind him. As inside of Izuku's head, he's like, not enough, not yet, kind of just going in on the dude. As Izuku starts to, yell, and eventually the wall behind the dude completely breaks as he slides into the building. As Izuku goes to go and hit the dude again, but he realizes he's inside of a grocery store. And he also realizes that everybody's looking at him. As he stops himself, he looks at the dude that's on the ground. The dude looks like Martin after he fought Tommy Hearns. But for the most part, other than that, he doesn't look like he has any fatal injuries, since the dude also seems to be healing, which kind of looks out for Izuku, as he kind of leaves the building that he broke into. So he turns to the other guy as he says, "Are you okay?" As when he turns over, the other guy just starts to run away. And Izuku's just kind of, sitting there inside of disbelief as he literally says, "So I get beat up and stabbed multiple times, and he just is gone." Great. As he kind of makes two more swords. So he looks at his swords on the ground as he sees that those ones are broken. As he sheaths the sword properly and everything like that, he collects every kunai that he could find and shuriken. And he kind of begins to kind of limp away. As when his muscles and tissue are kind of knitting themselves, he kind of falls to the ground as he slowly pushes himself back up and kind of tries to stand up straight and everything like that. As, he kind of continues to walk as he kind of, slumps behind a trash can to gain his breath. As when he does, through the side of his eye, he sees a hero, one of the heroes that he used to write about, Eraserhead, run straight past him. As Izuku kind of, looks at this as he thinks that he didn't see him, as he kind of looks over as Eraserhead runs into the building right next to him and everything like that. As Izuku kind of, sighs inside of, inside of a okay, good type of way. As he gets up and he eventually limps his way home. As when he gets home, he kind of collapses on his bed as he kind of turns over onto his back, breathing really hard. She looks down and she says, and of course I'm bleeding on my bed. As he kind of puts his arm around his eyes, as he's just kind of breathing as his body's trying to heal itself. Eventually, he falls asleep after a while of breathing and trying to calm himself down. And to his surprise, he wakes up the next day. Izuku continues on night after night, week after week with this vigilante work. Kind of almost becoming his education, sort of like a crucible to him, if that makes sense. But eventually he kind of, realizes that he's becoming faster. It's harder to stop him. His blades are becoming sharper. His limits, his senses are becoming more strengthened. But the more and more he goes out, the closer and closer he comes to be like beginning to be caught, you know. He runs into more heroes. He realizes that this vigilante work that he's doing is becoming more and more recognized. And it's almost like, and this is what scares him, it's almost like pain and fatigue and a lack of companionship is becoming a routine to him. Sort of like everything that he's going to is becoming too normalized. Even violence and seeing people getting hurt is becoming too normalized to him. The other day, Izuku literally saw a dude get shot and die on the pavement. And he felt some type of way about it, but he didn't feel bad inside of the sense of, feeling somber to it. He just felt angry. And he continued to fight harder and harder. And one night, Izuku kind of freezes after, a rough fight onto the streets as he realizes he's becoming too used to all of this. He's becoming used to hurting people and just leaving. As, Izuku decides to, eventually after a while stop going out and doing vigilante work. Mainly because, first off, he's getting too used to it. But the main part is he's getting closer and closer each time to get caught. And if he gets caught, he's spending years in prison. He's using weapons on people. And not just like, bats or staffs. He's using swords. Anybody that was to look at it a certain way, they just see it as multiple failed murders. And because he's getting damaged as much as them, if not worse, it's almost like he's failing. So eventually, over the next couple of days, he kind of begins to chill out off of it. And he kind of, goes about his daily life, going to the store, training his quirk, but not going out and doing vigilante work. Until one day, he gets inside of his house. He's putting up his groceries and everything. And then he hears a knock on his door. As, Izuku kind of turns over as he kind of thinks to himself. He doesn't get visitors. Bakugo never comes to see him. If anything, he goes to see Bakugo. He wasn't called. He would have been called if his mom got out of the hospital. So he kind of, begins to panic a little bit as he says, did I get caught? Is that the police? As he kind of backs away from the door as he hears another knock on it. As he kind of shakes to himself, as he thinks to himself, he wasn't meaning to hurt anybody or go to prison. He just wanted to help people. He wanted to support and make sure that people didn't die, make sure that people couldn't continue to hurt others. As, the knock on the door kind of gets a little louder, as Izuku kind of realizes to himself If this is the police, there's no point in running. Eventually, I'm going to get caught, especially with the type of heroes and people with quirks that they have. Support heroes are some of the most powerful whenever it comes to tracking down someone. As he cautiously approaches the door, and he kind of puts his hand on the doorknob and everything like that. And as he does, he kind of sees the door swing open. As when it swings open, he sees an almost impossibly large figure. As he kind of looks up, as he sees All Might standing there smiling. As he kind of hears All Might, say, "I am here." As Azuku's just kind of looking up at him in shock. His heart slowly beginning to calm down, but him still, inside of that panic state. So he sees All Might just standing there overly, charismatic and everything. Just almost too happy. As, All Might kind of looks down at him as he says, "Young Midoriya?" As, he kind of looks up as he says, "This is the person that I wanted to train you. His name is Eraserhead. He will be helping guide you and your abilities. They are unique and more tactical and stealthy and precise. I think that he's the best fit for your potential." As, Azuku's just kind of looking as he blinks. He blinks one more time. He blinks again. As, he eventually looks over. As, just like he said, he sees Eraserhead just standing there. As, eventually, All Might says, "Can we come in?" As when he says that, Zuko kind of nods. As when he nods or whatever, he lets them in. As All Might kind of says, "The place is very clean. Um, your mother has done a very fine job." As, Zuko kind of looks at him as he says, "Yeah, something like that." As eventually, the room kind of gets silent on some. As when the room gets silent, All Might kind of, eventually mutters, "Well, this is awkward." As when he eventually says that, Eraserhead kind of looks at Izuku as he says, "Look, the only reason I'm doing this or even agreed to it is because All Might paid for my food a couple of times and I owed him a favor. This is nothing more than just a favor between colleagues. Nothing more. Don't expect too much out of it. I'm not taking you as a sidekick and I'm not making you into a hero, nor am I giving you a recommendation letter. I'm only helping you because All Might told me to." As, Azuku kind of nods as he says, "That's completely understandable." As, Eraserhead kind of looks at him as he says, "As long as you know that." As All Might basically says, "Most of your training regimens will be going on during the late day or the nighttime, especially since what you will be doing is stealth-based. Eraserhead here is going to help you with all types of things, but he's not like me. He's not going to go easy on you. He's going to treat you exactly like what you are, a student, or more specifically, an underling. He's going to train you by any means necessary, no matter whether you break or you're able to bend." As, Aizawa kind of looks at him as he says, "You mean whether you bend or break?" As All Might kind of nods as he says what he said. As Izuku kind of looks at the both of them as he says, "I mean, that's completely understandable, especially since he's training me to do something that kind of risks my life. I understand that what I'm doing is serious and that, needless to say, it's something that could really get me hurt. As, eventually All Might kind of looks at him as he says, "Good, as long as you understand the how important what you're doing here is." As Izuku kind of looks up at him as he says, "You can rely on me." As Eraserhead kind of gets up, as All Might kind of gets up behind him like a lost dog, as he says, "Good. Meet me later today, 9 o'clock. Don't be late." As he just kind of leaves, as, All Might kind of looks over at Izuku as he says, "Well, see you later, Mr. Midoriya." As he goes to leave, as Izuku says, "Wait." All Might and Aizawa kind of stop. But Aizawa kind of looks back as he continues to leave. As All Might says, "Is there a problem?" As Izuku looks at him as he says, "How did you find where I live?" As, the room kind of gets silent, almost eerily silent for a while. As All Might then says, overly charismatic, "My job as a hero is to figure out these types of things. You didn't know?" As Izuku kind of just looks at him in shock and disbelief as he says, "So your response to just randomly finding my house is this is what you're supposed to be able to do as a hero?" As he looks directly at him as he says, "Exactly. It was nice meeting you, Mr. All Might." As, All Might kind of, nods at him and leaves. So, after a while, night eventually falls, kind of like a blanket over the city. And Izuku eventually perched to the top of a high rise. So he kind of waits for Aizawa and everything like that. As Aizawa looks at him as he says, "You're late." As Izuku kind of looks at his Aizawa as he says, "No, I'm not. I'm actually exactly on time." As Aizawa kind of looks at him as he says, "If you're not 15 minutes early, consider yourself 15 minutes late." As, Izuku kind of straightens his back as he says, "Being a hero isn't all about glory like some people think. Some people think it's about money, but really it's about helping people. Saving people is the most important part of our job. The other most important part of your job is to remember that you're not invincible. At the end of the day, any villain, no matter how small you think they are or how insignificant, can kill you. There's no such thing as you being impossible to hit or you being too strong. But there is a such thing as being underprepared or too weak or not fast enough. Being a hero is about saving people no matter what. Now, there are sometimes workarounds and sometimes situations where you can avoid doing things that you don't want to. But here's the fact." As he looks him dead in the eyes as he says, "One day you're going to have to face a situation where it's either you kill the villain or a person dies. And depending on which you pick and how easy it is depends on what type of hero you are and how that will build your future. And even if you do have to kill a villain, or you feel like you have to, does not mean you will get away without any consequences. More than likely, you'll end that villain's life and you'll go to prison. and you'll never be seen of again. Let's get this straight. Quirks are not gifts, they're not talents, they're weapons. Weapons used to hurt people most of the time, but they can be used for good. So, the most important thing that you need to learn is how to sharpen, steel, and hone that weapon. If you cannot do those things, you cannot use that weapon properly. And the only thing that you will do is hurt other people. So, this is how you're going to be training. As Izuku kind of says, "What do you mean?" As soon as he says that, he sees All Might land directly in front of him as he falls back onto his butt. As Aizawa looks at him as he says, All Might will be doing multiple things throughout this night. He will be throwing giant pieces of trash at you. You will have to sneak up on him and touch him without him noticing. If he does notice, your job from that point will be to run away as fast as possible. You have 4 things that you need to do. Train your durability, train your strength, train your stealth, train your mind, and most important over anything, train your instinct. As Izuku kind of looks at him as he says, "What about training other aspects of my quirk?" As Aizawa looks at him as he says, "Just from you telling me that alone tells me you're not ready to be a hero or even be inside of UA. Not everything is about training your quirk. It's about training the things that are around your quirk first and then figuring out things involving your quirk. Different ways to use it, ways that it can be used to save people, how exactly much is too much or too little." As, eventually Aizawa says, "And here's the kicker. You'll have all the way until this time, all the way until, I'll say 12. As he said, "Oh, so it's only, 3 hours?" So he says, "No, I mean 12 in the evening." As Izuku looks at him as he says, "Wait, that's more than 8 hours. You want me to train for more than 8 hours? Without sleep, anything to drink, rest?" As Aizawa gets, literally straight up into Izuku's face as he looks at him as he says, "Do you think the villains will care if you've eaten or had anything to drink? Do you think they're going to care about anything that you do? The only thing that they're going to care about is whether or not you're going to stop their plan and whether or not you were strong enough to be able to do that. Villains only care about themselves." As, Izuku kind of, looks at him as he nods. As he says, "Okay, now, you've already failed one of the steps." As Izuku looks at him as he says, "What do you mean?" So he says, "Well, I never said we didn't start. You've already failed to sneak up on All Might." As he says, "So what, does that mean we have to start over?" As he says, "No, that's not what that means at all." Suzuka kind of, gets a little bit of hope in his eyes as he says, "What that means is All Might will be following you and beating the crap out of you until either you get away or you lose consciousness." As Izuku says, "You can't be serious. All Might isn't the type of person that would do something like that." As All Might says, "Young Midoriya, this is about training, not about being a hero. As far as what I understand here, I'm basically a villain." As Izuku kind of looks at him as he says, "You're joking, right?" As All Might kind of laughs as he says, "Oh, young Midoriya, you wish." And as soon as he says that, Izuku barely dodges a punch that would have taken off his head. As Aizawa looks up at All Might as he says, Going on easy on him, huh, All Might? As All Might kind of looks at him as he says, "Not at all. Just giving him some time to run." And as soon as he says that, Izuku instantly hits the jets and tries to get away from All Might, which, to say the very least, is easier said than done. So, for the next couple of, for the next 10 months, that's basically what they're doing. Izuku kind of, running away, All Might tracking him down and basically beating the absolute crap out of him if he does catch him. Izuku learning how to push himself and his abilities as far as they can go. And he learns a couple of things. First off, Tactical Shinobi was a very good name for his power, because apparently what he can also do with his abilities is he can make smoke bombs, or more specifically, any bomb he really wants to. But it takes more time or longer to make stronger bombs. He can make smoke bombs, acid bombs, handheld bombs, but the longer he takes to charge these things, the more stamina they take, but the stronger they are. He also has the ability to physically control his muscles and augment his physical body, essentially shape-shifting. He can also use this ability to create weapons within his body. So control things like his bones, or, for example, sharpen his nails and make them into weapons. But he can only do that on the smaller sense. And by control his bones, I mean he had to kind of be under a MRI machine, and they figured out that he could actively manipulate his bones in the sense of where they are in his body. But he does still, he's still affected by different bones inside of his body changing different ways. Not only that, it's extremely painful, so it's not something he can do passively. Izuku also figures out that apparently Aizawa knew that he was doing vigilante work a while back. He figured it out because apparently whenever he creates his weapons made out of beryllium, these weapons are made from minerals inside of his body and have traces of his DNA. Which means if you take those blades, break them apart, and compare them with his DNA, you can figure out that those blades are made from the same thing that he is. It's also why creating too many blades drains him, because it literally takes away from the minerals inside of his body. What they can't explain is the fact of why these blades work as they do. For example, why, based off of the momentum, is based off of how fast they're able to swing and the less air resistance they have. That physically shouldn't be possible, even with him being able to create weapons out of the minerals in his body. But for the most part, that's not really overly important. Another thing that he realized was all of the senses in his body were enhanced, which is why he can jump rooftop to rooftop. Specifically, things like his sense of balance and everything that you can possibly think of are enhanced inside of his body, including his hearing, which doesn't give him super hearing or anything like that unless he manipulates his body. It's more of, it enhances his hearing so that he can hear lower frequencies easier, or higher frequencies. And his ears stay inside a perfect condition. So, to say the very least, he has some of the best ears on the planet for a natural human. Not inside of the sense of people with, hearing-based quirks. There's a couple of other things that he can do, but for the most part, he hasn't figured out about it. They even had to take him to the hospital to see if this many quirks was normal. And for the most part, it isn't. His body shouldn't be able to handle this many quirks, but for some reason he has them. But some of them, after a while of research, he did figure out that some of the quirks are just linked to other ones. For example, his strength and durability are linked together. Those are technically one quirk, along with some of his other body's physical abilities and enhancements. But even outside of that, he does have a couple of other quirks that are not at all connected to those ones. And his ability was officially brought out and named within his files, which All Might and Aizawa were shocked to figure out that even after he was told that he had a quirk, it was never put inside of his medical records. So I'm going to leave this part off here because for the entire situation of him getting into UA and everything, I want that to be a different video. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like or subscribe. Comment on things that I can improve on or different video ideas that you have. Please join the Discord, either mine or TFP's. I really don't care which one it is. But, I really like making these videos for you guys. I was kind of drained for a while, which is why I didn't make any videos for a really, really long time, which I apologize for because I kind of just ghosted y'all. But, yeah, I'm going to just be honest with you. I was very drained, so, yeah. I will be coming up with different ideas soon, but I'm just thinking about how those things would start off. Also, comment down in the comments below if you guys are okay with things that don't actually fall within the My Hero world being added into this. You know what I mean? Because I know how to do certain videos if that's the case. But with that being said, love all of you guys. Don't die. Be safe. And I'll see you later. Peace.